Professor Twagirimana, I was wondering, when you think of all the myth that was created around Mr. Rusesabagina, and you've been in the US since '92, you know a little bit how media works in the US, you know the soft power, yet very powerful power that Hollywood represents. With the different platforms you have as a professor, as a leader in the community, and as well just as a resident of, you said, I believe you've been in the Buffalo area for many decades. What has been some of the ways you've pushed back on that false narrative, you've pushed back on that myth, and how, maybe share with us some of the victories or some of the way you can share of how to push back, because it is, as we all noted, Hollywood is a quite compelling, convincing soft power tool. So in your many decades in the US and with the many roles you've occupied and you still occupy, share with us how you've pushed back. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's quickly unpack, the title Hotel, Rwanda. We all have seen, reports in the news outlets here that almost always start with, Hotel Rwanda hero was captured, such and such, right? So, Hotel Rwanda, as Sharita mentioned, doesn't exist, so that's the first indication that we're dealing with, a fictional, a fictional determination, and again, as my colleague, Sharita said, Hollywood doesn't make movies for charities. They want to make money. And so they have a number of conventions that they have to follow, conventions of storytelling, including, creating a hero, that's why many people here who really know little about Rwanda and the genocide against the Tutsi actually find it in a lazy way, find it, again, easy to say, Hotel Rwanda, hero, so the movie makers themselves were, clever in, using that title actually, because, many people watch Hotel, Rwanda, were familiar with, the many movies about the Holocaust that came out of Hollywood in the 1980s and 1990s, including, Hotel Terminus, Schindler's List, Life is Beautiful, and, and others. So, they're obviously playing on that, list of, of previous movies as a way of connecting, the audience with, what they already know, right? So, but, let's keep in mind that idea of, of hero, because it's needed for Hollywood movies. They need to glamorize, the characters. They are not in the business of doing documentaries. Well, there are some people who do documentaries, obviously, but Hollywood does, storytelling using the movie, media. So it's that idea of, Hotel Rwanda, hero that has stuck in the mind of, of people. But there are, obviously people who also use it for, other purposes that have nothing to do with, the movie itself, but that's a point we will, come to, I believe, but in terms of pushing back, what I have done since 1994, actually, in a way of pushing back, was first study, the genocide, genocides in general, particularly the Holocaust, and then the genocide against the Tutsi, which I wrote about. I have at least 3 publications about that. But I also teach about, the genocide against the Tutsi every single semester in one of my courses, because I believe there are ways of including the topic in whatever domain, you're dealing with, So every semester I teach, about, the genocide against the Tutsi, and, I was never, attempted to use Hotel Rwanda, only because there were, better movies, like Sometimes in April, Beyond the Gates, Ichinya Rwanda, and many others that, came out after, Hotel, Rwanda. But I also knew actually people, at least two people who were at the hotel. And I, interviewed them for one of my books, and, what they told me simply, made me not, pay much attention to this man until, a few years ago when he openly became a genocide denier and became, and, and a terrorist who, whose movement launched attacks on, innocent civilians, in Rwanda, So what I've been doing is, teach, make sure, another thing I did, particularly at my university actually is organize conferences at least twice a year. When I was, the director of the, African and African American Studies, unit. So in the fall, I would do a conference about Rwanda and, Rwanda and genocide against the Tutsi and the Holocaust. And then in the spring, in February, during Black History Month, I will do another conference covering African Americans, but also, the genocide against the Tutsi, again. So, education. So that's one thing, that I've been doing, conferences, academic conferences across, across, the nation, Third, occasionally I take students, American students to Rwanda, and they can see for themselves things, that, and they, when they go to the Gisozi, genocide memorial, it's, a way of giving them, a more accurate story about what happened, what featured in 1994. But also there's at my school we have created, a colleague of mine, a Jewish college colleague of mine, and with in collaboration with myself and other people have launched what is called the Anne Frank Project, and every year since that period, I can't remember the exact date, but it was probably 2007. We have people talking about Rwanda, so and talking mostly about the genocide in against the Tutsi and ways in which the current leadership navigated the annihilation that was created by the genocide, but also the way they made different determination about leadership, and leading to rising from ashes and becoming an exemplar in many domains, right? So my main focus has really been on on education. Unfortunately, as I think Alice said, and it's many people tend to know that movie more than other movies, because that was it was sensational when it came out, and many college and university professors and high school teachers and their students saw the movie, but again, let's not kid ourselves, because as soon as they finish watching the movie, was like it is stipulated in one of the scenes in the movie, they went back to doing their own thing. The only people who continue to care are those people that, the students or, ordinary people that we take to Rwanda actually to, for them to experience, Rwanda and help actually to push back on, push back on that narrative created by Rusesabagina and his supporters.
Thank you, Professor Twagirana. So now we're at that moment of the panel where we've set the kind of the context. I feel like in the idea of demystifying someone who has been portrayed by Hollywood as a hero, someone who has been in a fictive manner propelled to to the title and the Medal of Honor President Bush bestowed upon him, I think now we can enter in the nitty-gritty of the trial. As you know, this trial was highly followed on the media. Even those of us outside of Rwanda had a lot of commentators that are non-Rwandan implicated. There were letters being passed around, Congress people, senators, I mean, you name it, everyone had a say in what was happening in Rwanda. And Rwanda, in an order of being transparent, in an order of making it accessible to everyone, even made it accessible. People were able to follow it streamed. So I'll turn it to Mr. Shalita with, again, your experience and that you've been, in a way, hunting down some genocidaires hiding on the US soil. Can you share with us, why do you think it was so highly followed by the media? Why do you think everyone had a saying, in a way almost of not honoring what the justice of Rwanda was already doing? Everyone was just commentating and everyone became a pundit of the Rwandan justice system, a pundit of what should happen and what should not happen. So what was your reaction of all of this? Thank you.
Well, one thing that Hotel Rwanda has done, in addition to, not telling the whole truth about the genocide against the Tutsi, Hotel Rwanda has been used to minimize the serious charges that have been brought against Rusesabagina, terrorist charges. I mean, because it comes from Hollywood and because he's been dubbed a hero, they have used the hotel, his family, his supporters, his fan club. They have used the movie to dilute the charges, the terrorist charges against him. Yet there is overwhelming evidence, most of which is on YouTube in his own words. His speech is really indicted. In one of the last videos, he says, we must do whatever we can to take back our country because all other means have failed. If that is not treason, it is at least seditious. The evidence provided by Belgium, the evidence provided by Western Union of all the money transfers to FLN, to all his lieutenants in Burundi, it's overwhelming. So to use Hotel Rwanda to make Rusesabagina a hero, an innocent guy, just doesn't work. For instance, I find it laughable to call him a critic of President Kagame. How come nobody ever called Osama bin Laden a critic of President Bush? Rusesabagina is not a critic. At best, he's a second-rate cook turned hotelier. Now he comes to court and says, "Oh, I'm not Rwandan. I gave up my citizenship," which is a bunch of nonsense. He was born in Rwanda. He is a Rwandan. In fact, when you listen to him, nothing out of his mouth is true. For instance, and I'm looking at his own statement signed on July 2021. On July 21, he says that he lost his passport. That was a sworn statement. July 21, 2004, he claimed he surrendered his passport to Belgium his passport number A003469. Then he turns around on July 26, 2004, makes a declaration that he lost his passport. So which is which? And on that same day, he paid 50,000 Rwanda francs for a new passport, receipt number 1309929. So you have to take what Rusesabagina says with a grain of salt. If he's not Rwandan, why did he want to become the president of Rwanda? I find it rather absurd that the international community, including the European Union Parliament, advocating for his release, but nowhere do they ever mention the people that were killed by FLN, the hundreds of Rwandans who were injured, who were maimed. All of a sudden, Rusesabagina has become the poster boy of good behavior and humanity. He has really used Hotel Rwanda to advance his so-called political career. In fact, not too long ago, I filed a citizen's complaint with the IRS. The Rusesabagina so-called charitable foundation has been used to fund his terrorist activities. There is no evidence that money collected by the Rusesabagina Foundation has ever been used to help, as he claims, to help Rwandan orphans. Not a shred of evidence anywhere. So why was he charged? No, he wasn't charged for being a recipient of a presidential medal. He wasn't charged for being a citizen of Belgium. And here is a point that he and his lawyers have failed to realize. Whether you're a Belgian citizen or if you're from Mars and you commit terrorist activities on Rwandan soil, you are answerable to Rwandan law. So all these claims that, oh, I'm not a citizen, oh, I gave up my citizenship. Under Rwandan law, you cannot do that. You can't simply give up your citizenship. But even if he did, the terrorist activities he committed are chargeable under Rwandan law. Was Rusesabagina, for instance, was he kidnapped? There is no evidence of that. And if anybody is to answer the charges of kidnapping, it should be the United Arab Emirates, because he got on the plane in Dubai. Now, who of us would get on a private plane that you didn't reserve, that you didn't pay for? Obviously, he was lowered onto the plane. He was duped, but that's not criminal. When has it ever been criminal to entice a terrorist to a place where you can capture him? The Israelis do it all the time. The Americans do it. Look at hundreds of alleged terrorists who have been at Guantanamo for years and years. How did they get there? They did not volunteer to go to Guantanamo, yet the international community, the so-called human rights organization, don't complain about these people. Yet when Rwanda takes steps to safeguard its security and sovereignty, the whole world is up in arms. Well, in a recent communique from the European Union Parliament, they threatened to sanction Rwanda. Well, I have news for them. That kind of threats, that kind of intimidation does not work for Rwanda, not now, not ever. If you ask me, the 25 years that Rusesabagina received was very lenient. But it also goes to show you the independence of our judiciary. In the last 5 or 6 years, 10 people have been extradited from the United States, which goes to say that they believe our judiciary is intact, our judiciary is independent. And on closing, let me say this. His family says that he was denied legal representation. That's hogwash. The so-called international lawyers that wanted to represent him have no license to practice law in Rwanda. For instance, a lawyer from Texas cannot go to California and practice law. You need a license to practice law in a different jurisdiction. In fact, the Belgian lawyer who went to Rwanda appeared in court, should have been charged with the unauthorized practice of law. But that goes to show you how functional our court system is. Rusesabagina has received what he deserves. And all the noise that's being made, he should be released on humanitarian grounds, that he's a cancer survivor. That's hogwash. He should have thought about that before he attacked Rwanda.
Thank you, Mr. Shalita. Madam Alisa, I would like you to comment on what has been said already, but as well, because I know your involvement in the community and your involvement, with the youth. Earlier, you mentioned proud mom of 4 kids. I was just curious, how do you equip as well the youth with, again, pushing back on everything that is said and pushing back on what people want to portray? Earlier, you were mentioning on every day, want to make sure people know something positive about Rwanda. How do you equip as well the youth? Because as you know, in Rwanda, the youth are the majority, and even in the US, some Rwandans in the community that are, the youth are either born here or came here so young that they don't have all the historical facts because they weren't there and didn't remember, to sometimes push back when people bring, fallacies to them. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kusa. Thank you, Mr. Willis. He just did a great job explaining everything that the world actually should know about Mr. Rusesabagina. Rusesabagina is no hero behind bars, like Mr. Willis just explained. He's a terrorist. He's a convicted terrorist. He pleaded guilty himself. He admitted to all those charges, but then it's just dumbfounding to see, to hear, to watch, to read international community, the MPs, the European MPs, or even international journalists, just to decide to choose and pick and talk about his heroism. You know what? Like Willis said that he does have news for them. I would like to ask a question, a simple question. Let us admit that Rusesabagina did save people, 10, 12, 200, 5,000. Let's even admit that and thank him that he did not kill anyone. I haven't heard any charges of him killing somebody in 1994, So just because he didn't kill, just because he saved 1 or 2 or 5 people, does that give him a license to kill, to wage a war of terror on Rwanda, to commit violent acts against Rwanda and Rwandans? Why does the international community choose to ignore that and just present him as the hero? Just because, even if we're not here to dispute that he's a hero or he's not, let's say he is. Does that give him rights to wage a war of terror and violence against Rwanda? I don't think so. I have examples. Let's say he has aspirations of becoming the next president of Rwanda. That's fine. It's his right. He's Rwandan. But we have countries, our neighboring countries in Africa, in East Africa. We have Kenya, we have Uganda. You all know Mr. Odinga, for example. What would happen if Mr. Odinga in Kenya decided to found or Kenyan FLN, just to remove Kenyatta and become president. Would the Kenyan people just stood and watch him do that? No, I don't think so. What would happen in Uganda if someone like Bobby Wine or Besigye decided to fund a terror group? No, they will be answerable for those crimes. And that's what the international community just chooses, maybe because it's Rwanda, to ignore intentionally. And then in efforts to continue demystifying this man, Rusesabagina, we all Rwandans, especially our young people, should focus on repeating those things that Mr. Wills just said. Rusesabagina is a convicted terrorist, period. Nothing else, nothing more. It doesn't matter what other people are saying or international journalists are saying that this is a hero behind bars. No, he's a terrorist. He's a convicted terrorist and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Now, back to the question you asked about what the youth should be doing. Like I gave an example of myself. We have our young people very busy, very savvy with the technology, being on Instagram, being on TikTok, being on Twitter, being on Facebook, being everywhere on social media. Yes, it's politics, it's boring, it's for adults, but we, the parents or the leaders, the activists, should always try to get them involved. I try to have a few debates on my own personal Facebook account, just to raise awareness, to get them interested. There are things you learn in school. There are things you learn in your community. There are things these days you learn on social media. Young people maybe don't have time to read because they're super busy, but we have to find things that interest them more, and keep them engaged, keep them like inquisitive, keep them curious, and then give them the facts and go the extra mile, we as the adults, and find the facts they need and share with them. We all, I'm sure, are in WhatsApp groups in our communities. But how many of us share information about Rwanda and current events? I repeat, current events in Rwanda. Not that many. Maybe that's where we need to start. Start with your own community. Start with your own family at home. My children are very well educated in that. Start with your own family at home, in your own community, in your state, and all over the United States. We work, in our places of employment. You don't have to be working in a school or in a college to talk about Rusesabagina, the history of the genocide against the Tutsi. Anywhere where you work, I'm pretty sure they ask questions, but sometimes people don't have the right answer because they don't have time to look for facts. But if we had shared those posts on a regular basis in our own WhatsApp groups, in our community, maybe people would have them. And start, it doesn't have to be much, but on a regular basis, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, have a talk about that. Open up. For example, I see in my own community, people talk more about prayers, group meetings, which is good. The pastors are there. We need the spiritual growth. We need the spiritual maintenance of everything. But I don't see community leaders doing that in terms of teaching and encouraging and then getting the young people involved into this. I'm not in all community groups, but the ones I'm in it, I might be one or two people, and me and Mr. Simba doing it in our own local Indiana community groups. So those are things that we can do, small ones. If you see them on Facebook, we see them on Instagram or on Twitter, when you make a post, tag them, encourage them to speak up, ask them their opinions, get ideas for them, invite them to take ownership of the debate and voice out all their concerns. We can remain polite and civil and yet fight for the truth. That's what I would say about the young people. Because our topic was the mystification of Mr. Rusesabagina. To me, Mr. Rusesabagina is naked. He's not a mystery. He is who he is. He's a con man, like Mr. Willis said. But most importantly, we all should know in our take-home messages, Mr. Rusesabagina is a convicted terrorist, period, nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Alice. This is the unfortunate time where I have to realize that time is going against us. And in a passionate topic like this one, when it touches our Gihugu Cyatubyaye, the country to whom we owe our pride, which is Rwanda, we have to go into the concluding remarks. So we'll go around, each of you, please, maximum 2 minutes, just concluding remarks. Maybe it's a call to action to our attentive audience. Maybe it's pointing towards more resources where people can learn more. Or maybe it's a challenging, open-ended question to all of us. But please, let's go in the concluding remarks. And we'll start with Professor Bienvenue.
All right, thank you, Jusa. I think that will be brief. In the topic really we're reflecting on really poses a bigger question of how we move forward, because I have seen a slew of writings in the literature and the books in constant production that are just opposed to Rwanda, that it go against. Rwanda will do one thing and they will see it in a different light. And no match to this case, what actually the trial has exemplified. I was really thinking and trying to give the benefit of the doubt of these critics of Rwanda in academia, but also activists and all his friends I saw making their cartwheels on the European Parliament floor. There's really one thing that came clear to my mind. These people, you give them the best trial they can dream of. Had this been anything different, or however it had been conducted in the way they assumed meet their standards, there was never going to be satisfaction on their part. I remember when the country launched the Gacaca jurisdiction in 2002, it was 2002 and 2004, and then the major critic, all the hubbub in the media, international media, in academia, people have written and have ran a lot of ink, writing and criticizing and blustering the Gacaca in Rwanda. And the criticism was that, oh, these are, these 1,200 community tribunals, 12,000 community tribunals in Rwanda, set to try over 2 million cases, that there's no way there's going to be fairness. There's no way people can trust these people. They are just being picked and trained for a couple of days and they're set to deliver justice in Rwanda. So, and then the major criticism was that in Rwanda—
1 minute.
Quickly. And the major criticism was that these tribunals did not meet the standards of international jurisprudence. So all that, you look at what they hear and then you put yourself on the other side and you say, okay, what else would have happened? These institutions were launched or built with the ultimate aim of reconciling Rwandans. It was a restorative justice. It's one than somehow to deliver some cathartic form of justice. But you give them anything, they will always find a fault to Rwanda. So for those people who write about Rwanda, it's unfortunate because this war has to continue. It's a battle for us who are in academia. I think we need to strive for pushing back against this love or hate type of knowledge about Rwanda. I mean, it has become dismaying, intellectually dismaying. So it's going on. There's no way you will tell me any country that has survived a genocide still lives under trauma, but it went on nonetheless to try and bring close to 12 million individual cases related to the crimes committed during the genocide. So it's up to everyone in their respective spaces to be the voice of this history we commonly come from and we share, and continue to push back and balance these views that are relayed against Rwanda.
Thank you, Professor Bienvenue. Mr. Rudasunikwa?
はい、ありがとうございます。あの、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、まず、 Yes, Mr. Chusa, thank you so much. This is what I can say. In Kinyarwanda, they have a proverb that says, ngo injiji ikirondwe iguma kumwite inka yarapfuye. I'm gonna try to interpret that. Stupid ticks clings on the dry skin when the cow died long time ago. So I want to tell this to the people in the fan club of Rusesabagina. The Kadin group, the Kruger and Catherine Kruger group, and others. The skin you're clinging on, the cow died a long time ago. Tonight, R. Kelly is in courts of law. He was a famous musician. Bill Cosby just got some mercy to get out. He was what they called the father of America. But we look back and we see what they did, and they were charged. So your cow, so-called the hero, died. So stop clinging on the dry skin. There are so many movies, Shooting Dogs, which is called Beyond the Gates, 100 Days, sometimes in April. None of those people who participated in those movies declared a war on Rwanda. Rusesabagina said himself that twagiye muri Nyungwe, twebwe twararakaye, twagiye muri Nyungwe kandi twagiye kugumayo. We were angry, we went to Nyungwe and we went to stay there. To the international community, Rusesabagina is not a Belgian. He's a Rwandese. He went to Nyungwe, where he's from. He didn't find any other forest, any other territory to go and wage a war. If he was a Belgian, why didn't he start his rebellion in Belgium? Why did he go to Nyungwe? So please don't cling on the dead skin. I will say Rwandan lives matters. Rusesabagina is the commander-in-chief of FLN. And he was charged because of the atrocities the FLN committed as the commander-in-chief. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Rudasunikwa. Next, I'll have Professor Kwajirimana.
Right, thank you again, for doing this, and let me use my time actually to try to answer a question you asked. Why did the media react in ways that they did? First, there's intellectual laziness, I think, where you have these agencies actually, regurgitating and repeating the same narrative over and over. Hotel Rwanda hero is this and this and this. You see the same introduction, to this, and make no mistake, they will continue to do this, as news stories maybe in the future emerge. So we need to be, ready to, fight, this kind of, logic. Again, that's the nature of communication. We need to, be able to continue to be ready to, organize, like talks like this and on a more regular basis and in different parts of the world, So that was number one. Number two, I think there's a clear sense of intentional, what I call intentional dishonesty, that you see on the part of the European Union, for example, or, even some of our leaders in Congress here who, you have seen Human Rights, Watch and Amnesty International and, and others, who know better, but they have made it a point actually to attack Rwanda, whenever they have a chance, right? Whether Rwanda does something good or bad, they will always find ways of attacking, attacking the country, which leads me to the third, point. So interestingly enough, these organizations or these individuals are are actually writing on the success of Rwanda. So they use Rwanda's success actually to make themselves relevant. The question is, as our president asked a few, I think was it last week or the week before, what kind of story would they, want to hear? What if, what kind of, what would they be saying if Rwanda was a failed, state? Is that what they want? Is that really what these organizations and individuals want? So, obviously they write in the success of Rwanda to make themselves, relevant. Fourth point, and that's where I will finish. That's where I will end. There is, this colonial mentality that refuses to die. To me, I tell you, I have lived in this country long enough to know that it's still there, that colonial mentality that says that that the European, the North American is superior, that there's nothing good that can happen in a developing country. I tell you, it's really aggravating. It irritates me to the point where sometimes I wonder what I'm doing, here actually, and that mentality, unfortunately, is going to continue, right? So there's, I really believe that, the new economic arrangement among African countries can help actually deal with that problem if we can develop as a continent and be more self-sufficient. Maybe that can contribute to ending this colonial mentality that looks at African countries as countries that need to be supervised.
Okay.
In 2021, that should not be part of of the mentality of anybody in the world. So I will leave it at that, and thank you again for doing this.
Thank you. Madam Alice?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chusa. I will try to be brief. Demystifying Rusesabagina's and the fallacy of his film, I just wanted the people, our audience, our friends, and everybody to know this one thing. Rusesabagina is not a hero, right? He is a terrorist, and that's where we have to put the emphasis. It doesn't matter that he did not kill people in 1994. It doesn't matter that he may have saved people or maybe he didn't. He is not a hero. He's not a hero behind bars. He's a convicted terrorist, the likes of Bin Laden and others. That's what we need to know. And him being a fake hero, Hollywood fabricated hero, did not give him rights, no license to wage a war of terror on Rwanda, to kill innocent Rwandans, and to the international community, especially the journalists. Opposing the government is okay, but opposing the government is quite different from fighting a country. Anyone fighting a country, anywhere, anyone bringing violence to any country in the world, they will be met with according measures. Other than that, fellow Rwandans, more movies, more films will be made. Books will be written with false narratives and false facts. We can do nothing about it. But what we can do is take time, not to ever get tired of explaining over and over that they don't get tired of negatively portraying Rwanda. We need to spend more time explaining to our friends in the community, our friends at work, people just on the social media, how himself, the man, admitted to being guilty in his own words. And to end our evening, I would like to call upon all patriot Rwandans to always take time to read, to research for facts, and spare just a little bit of their time on social media explaining what's happening in Rwanda currently versus what people are portraying out there. It's not up to the government only to do this job. It's a task for all of us patriots, especially those living abroad. Thank you.
Thank you, last but not least, Mr. Shalita.
Well, I would very briefly say this. It's the collective effort of every Rwandan, especially in the diaspora, to defend the good name of Rwanda. It shouldn't be our foreign diplomat, it shouldn't be government officials, it's you and I and everybody else who loves Rwanda. The question of why the news media has taken up the Rusesabagina's case very actively reminds me of the classic definition of news. News is not when a dog bites man, it's when man bites dog. So there is some juicy aspect of the Rusesabagina's case. Justice should not only be done, it should be seen to be done. And Rusesabagina's trial and eventual conviction has done justice to his victims. To our foreign detractors, I can assure you patronizing Rwanda is simply political theater. It will not work. The threats of withholding aid will not work, it cannot work, and it will not get Rusesabagina out of prison. President Kagame has repeatedly said there is a price to be paid for destabilizing Rwanda, for attacking Rwanda. Simply put, you do the crime, you do the time. Rusesabagina is where he belongs.
Thank you, Mr. Shalita. We come from a continent of proverbs. Earlier, our colleague and comrade, Mr. Rudasunikwa, shared a beautiful adage in Kinyarwanda, but there's one as well in English shared by many cultures in Africa that says, until the lion speaks, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. When you think about that, Rwandans, the Rwandan community living abroad, but also the Rwandans living in Rwanda, we know how many times people have falsified our history. We know how many times media portrays Rwanda in a nefarious way, and they have their own agenda. And as much as it's not pleasant to us, they have their reasons. And as many of you have noted, sometimes it's a monetary reason behind it because it sells more to sell fear. It sells more to sell the ongoing, as Professor Twagirimana just alluded to, the classic colonial, let's help this country. If they're not collaborating with us, we'll pinch them a little bit and then they'll come back in our lane we've preconceived for them. But this is 2021 and this is a new Africa, a new Rwanda. And I think the way we're owning our story, the way all of us are willing to take up on some of their precious time on a evening like tonight shows how dedicated we are. And I think that when you think even at the core of our country, Rwanda, Kwanda, when you think of how in our hearts, Rwanda is everywhere. There's the Rwanda we know, Gasabo, but everywhere. There's a Rwanda in Indiana, there's a Rwanda in Belgium, and a Rwanda in Japan. So I think it's for us to always remember that we are the Rwanda everywhere. And I always remember that, yes, they have Hollywood, some other countries have BBC, TV5, you name it. They have those powerful platforms that are disseminating sometimes information that are not giving us justice. However, us, we have the most precious resources, our people, abantu bacu. So that's where it's always an invitation to remain on alert. It's an invitation to keep documenting ourselves, to keep using data, and to keep using the facts. I love that some of you take the time to take people actually physically to Rwanda, because I think that's always the best way to just put people okay with what are the reality on the ground. But one thing I always say, we cannot afford to remain silent, because when we remain silent, others are publishing books. Remain silent, are posting things. Maintenance, people are circulating letters with dignitary signing with some falsified content. So we must speak now, we must speak yesterday, and we shall continue to speak tomorrow, because as we know, we are the best defenders of our mother country, but as well, we owe it to those that have yet to come, the generations after us, as of the shoulders of giants we stand upon. So with that, I want to again extend my extreme gratitude to you, fellow panelists. Thank you for gracing us with your time. Attentive audience, always pleased by how much you follow us and support us at One Nation Radio. To the One Nation Radio team, Muhumuza, always supporting us in the background. We appreciate you. And with that, I'll always remain by saying, please stay healthy and keep taking care of the beautiful human you see in the mirror, which is you. Murakoze cyane.
Thank you.
Okay.
You.
Bye-bye.